Guys, it's Melissa again. I'm back and I've got my supplies. I think I have my paints picked out. The first paint I'm using is going to be coffee bean. So on my boards I always paint, there's a debate, I always paint the back side of my boards. I always paint and seal them, usually at least one coat, sometimes two each, and that way I'll do that first before, and then I'll let it dry, and then I'll flip it around. And I'm going to go ahead and paint this my darkest color. So I'm going to flip you down and I'll just keep on talking, and I've got my computer screen up, so hopefully when I get this all set up I can make sure I have everything in the screen like it's supposed to. So let me just double check here. If you give me just maybe 60 seconds or less. Okay, I might have to move my screen up higher. Bear with me here. I'm also on a delay too. I've got my laptop set up so that way I can kind of make sure and what I'm doing is on the screen so we don't miss anything. So let's see if that works. Okay, so before I got started I did use my sander. I have a sander that I use outside. I sand the sides. Normally these boards come and there's usually like one area on each side that's pretty scuffed up or pretty rough. So I do my best to sand them and keep the roundness to it. And then I sand each side in the direction of the board. And I'll go through and do the other side. I kind of look things over to see which side I'd like to have my front and back. I think with that there and that there, this is going to be my back side. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I just have a regular artist brush I'm using here. This is, I don't know what size it is, but it's a square. I do have a couple of these Klingons that I love, but I like to save these for big projects, and I also like to save these for when I go to seal, because I just like how thick these are and how it holds the clear coat. When it comes to sealing, it just provides a nice coat. So I'll usually save this for last or for when it comes time to sealing. So I have Dixie Belle's coffee bean. I'm gonna have to shake it up really good. I hate saying it, I'm not a fan of these FIFO bottles. Some people have great luck with them. I haven't. So I'm just going back to just using 8-ounce jars when I buy new. I do have 16-ounce in these because and the clear coats, because I go through this part so fast. But the paint, it's amazing sometimes on these projects how little paint you do use. So, and even with painting some furniture, if you're using more than one color, usually 8 ounces will be enough too. So I'm gonna be unconventional here, because if I actually squeeze the FIFO bottle, I'll probably have it splatter out. So I'm just gonna pour some into another cup, and that's probably too much. But coffee bean, I believe, is one of their darkest browns. And the reason why we're doing this is because we're doing the background in layers. And we move on to the next steps. You'll see how this works out, because when I do these signs, my signs always have the monogram in there, and the monogram is always the darkest. So it just, you'll learn, and it'll just kind of keep building. And if you have any questions, just feel free to ask, and I'll do everything I can to explain it. So, and the paint's a little bit thick. I could lighten it up with a little bit of water, but I'm not going to, because it's smoothing out okay. So just go in the same direction as the board. And when I do get done, I will be painting all the sides too. And I got my little helper here, if you can't hear Jazz clappering on the wood floor. So I've learned through trial and error that I like getting the back sides done first, especially before putting the sealer on the front when I'm all done. because it takes 30 days for your sealer to cure, and It's prone to getting indentions if you turn it around and put it on something. If you've got something underneath there, like I've got my canvas drop cloth here for protecting my table. If I had something kind of hard underneath there and it was underneath on top of that, I turned around on top of that, it might leave an indention in the clear coat if it hasn't properly cured the 30 days. So sometimes I still forget. So, but that's always my goal, is to get the back side done, and then once I'm all done with the back side, I don't have to turn it back over again. So I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you guys give this a try, and please share your progress with me in our group, because I'd love to see how you're doing and love to see what you get done. I love making these signs. It's just creative fun. And when we get done with this part, we'll move on, and I'll show you on the computer actually how I do my designs in my Silhouette Studio. I do have the Cricut program, but I don't have a Cricut, and I'm not comfortable with the Cricut program, so I'm afraid I can't help you with the designing part in Cricut. But it should be pretty much similar when it comes to designing these, because it's a basic design. We have a monogram letter for the back part of the background, and then over that we'll have our design, and usually I have the last name, the 2 first names, and an established date. So, and you'll get to see that here in another step or two on how I do that. And I am from Iowa, and we're getting into the humid part of the year, so sometimes I have to switch things up when it comes to stenciling. Normally when I stencil, I tend to wait till my paint is completely dry before I start pulling it up. Sometimes when we get in this humid part of the year, I have to, oh, I got a little paint boogie. If you see that, just go ahead and pull it out and then wipe your brush across. Okay, so when it comes to humid weather like that, here in Iowa, or where you're at, sometimes I will pull the stencil up when it's still wet, but I kind of have to be strategic and plan ahead. So if it comes to that, it might be a good idea to show you how I do that. So okay, so we got the back part done. I'll go ahead and start painting the sides. I might have to add more paint. I'll at least paint the top half of the sides here, because we want everything covered. And we're putting on a light coat, because it's best to put on light coats and then add a second coat than it is to put it on thick, and then you have like ridges of paint on the corners. Yeah, I'm gonna have to add a little bit more paint in my container. So this is Dixie Belle's Coffee Bean. And once this bottle is over, I'm gonna have to get a new supply, because that'll be it for me. Okay, I always feel like I'm holding a pizza when I'm doing this, or a big cookie, and that's a lot of paint right there, so I gotta be careful and get that smoothed out. Okay, and just keep turning. And if you have I do have a Lazy Susan upstairs. If you have a Lazy Susan you can craft on, this would probably be a good time to pull it out and use it. Because that way you don't have to hold this. This sign is kind of heavy. And also for these signs, I tend to use a sawtooth hanger on the back, and I'll show you how I put those on too. It's not exact science, but it's kind of, I'll show you how I get mine as centered as I can compared to what's on the front, so that way when they go to hang it, it hangs correctly. So I'm just kind of smoothing out the excess here and adding paint to the sides there. And with the way this is covering, I think one coat's going to be just fine on this. But before we move on, we'll let this dry. I'll put a coat of sealer on here, a couple coats. and then we'll flip it over and we'll start doing the same thing to the front, and we'll keep moving forward. So like I said, I'll be popping in and out of here, and I'll make sure you can see every step I do, so that way you know what to do also. So yeah, so if you get a little bit extra, just kind of go in the same pattern as the top, so you don't have brush strokes that are going wonky on you. And we're almost done with this part. A little paint boogie there. Yeah, so just wipe it off and then just go back over with your brush, that way it smooths out your fingerprint. And sometimes I'll also place one of these big containers on the table, and I'll put that on there to kind of help me hold it, because these do get heavy. There we go. Okay, so once it's dry, I'll come back and double check to make sure I don't have any paint areas that are missing. I think we got it all. So this is part of prepping the backside. And the way I think of it is the wood is always drying out, and if we're painting it and sealing it, this will help preserve it, so that way our sign lasts longer. So that's also part of my philosophy of always painting the backside. To me, it looks finished, and it also helps preserve your sign, so that way it lasts longer for whoever you're making this for. All right, guys, so that is it for now, and I will let this continue drying, and I'll pop back on before I move on to my next step, so you can see what I'm up to. See you in a little bit. Hello, it's Melissa again. I am playing with my camera angles just to see if I can get a better view. Let me get on my laptop here and see if it's working. The paint on my first coat of the background is dry. Okay, that's a little bit better. Let's go ahead and do more positioning. See if that helps. See, that's the hazard of having such a big sign. A big project, or one of the bigger projects. So the first coat of coffee bean has been applied, and it's dry. And I'm gonna basically, I keep saying basically, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to assume, and I hope I don't offend you, I'm going to assume that you don't know how to paint signs. So if what I'm going over is elementary to you, I apologize, but I want to make sure I don't miss anything when I teach and show you what I do and why I do it. So the first coat of coffee bean is on. I checked it over, and it looks to me like the one coat covered what I painted the way I wanted it, so I'm good with that. So I'm going to use my 220 grit sand block, and this thing has been through a lot. It's been used a lot. So I'm just going to go over it, because when you paint on a piece of wood, it tends to raise up the grain, and it also makes it feel rough. And when you do go to stencil, you don't want to stencil on a rough area, because you risk having bleeds when it comes time to doing that. Even though this is the back side, we still want this to feel smooth. So just go ahead and go over it. And I get my sand blocks either on Amazon or at my local hardware store. I think Walmart even has them. And then I'm just using a cloth, a lint-free cloth, one of those dust cloths, and I just wipe the dust off. Okay, so, oh, there's my clear coat. So I've got Dixie Belle's clear coat in flat. I can't talk. So this is what I'm going to use to start sealing. I'm just going to do one coat, let it dry, and then I'll come back on and we'll do a second coat, let it dry, and then I'll go ahead and we'll pick where the top and the bottom is going to be, and I'll show you in the following steps on how I mark it, so that way when it comes time to doing the front side, it'll be lined up. So so we'll go ahead and get started. And make sure your sign's free of any debris, because you don't want to seal any debris in there. And if you need to strip your sealer, use like a tongue depressor or a spoon or something. You don't want to shake it because you want air bubbles in there. So basically you just dip your brush in lightly like that, let the excess run off, and then usually I just do 1 or 2 swipes, and I try and avoid that area again if possible. And you just go clear across. And this is why I like this brush so well, because you get a lot of sealer on the bristles and you get a really good coverage. So if you do miss an area, don't worry about it, go back, because on the second coat we'll get that again. Because some areas might dry quicker and it looks like you missed it when you really didn't. If it's tacky and you go over it again, you're going to kind of ruin the smooth coat. So just do it once or twice and then just leave it. Okay, I almost didn't follow my own directions. So we will let that dry, and then we'll come back. I'll probably lightly sand it again. Let me go ahead and go around the edges here on the top side. Just like before. And you notice I didn't dip any back in the jar because I actually have enough sealer on my bristles to do this. That's why I like these Klingon brushes. I believe they're synthetic fibers and they're nice and smooth, and they just hold whatever you're painting with so well or sealing with. And try not to touch what you've put the sealer on. So that is it. And we will let that dry and I will come back. Hello, it's Melissa. I'm back again. I've just applied a first coat of sealer, Dixie Belle's clear coat, and it's been almost an hour. It's dry. I'm going to go ahead and do a second coat, and then I'm going to let it sit for probably a couple of hours before I move on to finishing my back side. So I'm going back over with my 220 grit sand block. This will be the last time I do it on this back side. Getting around the edges, and I'll go ahead and wipe the dust down. Just like that. And while my sealer was drying, I actually put my brush in a small jar of water temporarily, and I've got a paper towel, and I'm going to go ahead and just let that drain. I'm going to go ahead and dry it carefully with the towel and get as much excess water off as I can. I do have 2 of these brushes, but this will work just fine. There we go. So, and then I'll go ahead and get my clear coat. I'm just going to roll it instead of shake it to get things stirred up a little bit. There we go. And we'll just repeat the same process. And I just saw a hair of mine just flow right across on my sign. So just keep an eye out for any debris. And we'll just repeat the same process. And we'll let this sit for a couple of hours before we come back, and we'll apply our sawtooth hanger. I'll show you how I apply my label. If you decide you want to do a third coat, feel free to do that. Just follow the same process. Just when you do your final coat, then don't sand when you're done. Okay, let me go ahead and get around the sides. Carefully. Looking, making sure there's no drips. Or any debris. I'm sorry about that noise. My husband's got his toy out. He's got his toy tractor out playing in the yard. He's actually doing honeydew stuff, so I'm not going to complain. I'll just probably shut the door next time. So there we go. That is it for this. So I'll be back in a couple of hours and we will move on. So I'll see you after a bit. It's been 2 hours and I just realized I forgot to shut off my alarm. I put on the stove. It's gonna go off here in a few minutes, I think. We have done 1 coat of paint. There we go. Make sure we can see what's going on here. We've done 1 coat of paint, 2 coats of sealer. I set the timer for 2 hours and I'm back on. And I'm gonna show you, I normally, when I do my hangers, I tend to just eyeball it when I do the hangers, and then I'll show you later on how I line up for the front side on how I do this. But I'm going to show you a technique that I think would also work if you want to get a little bit more exact and not eyeball it. I just have a regular acrylic ruler that I use for my other projects, and I'm just going to try and line it up with the grain of the wood so I kind of get it level. I think this might be a little bit more, help you get a little bit more centered. We'll see how this works. So let's put tape on here lightly. I don't want to burnish it down. Let me grab something to write with. So then on that tape, about 17.5 inches. Oh Lord, I gotta do math now. Let me think. 8 1/4. Is that right? 8 and 8 is 16. Nope. 8 and 8 is 16 plus a half. So what? 8 and 8 and 3/4? I think that's right. Okay, so I'm just gonna mark that there, and then I'm gonna put my tape on top of it, and we'll just do it again. Like I said, you can just eyeball it if you want. I just wanna make sure I got this next tape on there. Whew. Sorry about that. So we're just gonna mark that again. So 8 and 3/4. Normally you should have 2, but I can't measure. I can probably come down here and measure just a little bit. Make it a little bit longer. So this might give you an idea on how to get it centered. So I think I'm gonna make, let me see here on the other side. Yeah, I think this side will be my top side. Just because I want to keep that little blemish at the bottom on my sign when we get the front part here. Yep, there's my timer. Let me go turn that off. Sorry about that delay. So I also grabbed a rag for later use. Now I usually use sawtooth hangers. You can get sawtooth hangers with either nails or with screws. I happen to have a set with nails for this one. Excuse me. I get mine from Amazon, or I get them at my local lumber store. So basically, I'll just line up that little dot on the sawtooth hanger. Like I said, we're just going to stick to the basics. I'm going to pretend like you don't know what to do. So that way, in case you don't, maybe you'll learn something new. I've got my my late father-in-law's antique hammer, which is perfect for small little projects like this. These sawtooth hangers hold up to 20 pounds, which is perfect because this, even though it feels heavy, it really is, I think it's less than 5 pounds. I've weighed it before. It's been a little while. I do the 6-foot growth charts, and those things weigh about 10 to 12 pounds. Whoop. That just went completely bye-bye. Let me find where that hole is. There we go. If you feel you want more security, you can get the ones with the screws, and you can screw them in. Just make a little hole and then screw it in. That way your hole's primed. So that's an idea of how to find your center. You don't have to, you can eyeball it like I normally do. So now we're going to go ahead and flip it around. I'm going to go ahead and save this tape, because this will help me mark on the other side where the top and bottom is. I'll just lightly put that over top to bottom, and I'll probably leave this on there as long as I can. Just take that part off that's all ripped up. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the next side. I'm going to go ahead and lay this down. It's a clean towel, just to provide a little extra cushion for my sign since I just freshly sealed it. And we're going to get started painting on this side. And I just realized I left my paintbrush in the kitchen, so I'm really organized. Let me go grab that and I'll be right back. Hold please. Give me about 60 seconds. Oh no, I didn't. I forgot. I'm like looking for it. I put it in the Ziploc baggie, so I wasn't done with the color yet. Let me see where we're at, make sure you can see everything. Yep, we are good. So now on this one, this is the front side, and we are going to do 2 coats because I want to make sure when I do my monogram on here, it's got a solid background. I preferably, I guess for this sign, I don't want the wood grain showing up through too much. We're going to do the same color, Coffee Bean and Dixie Belle. We're going to do the same thing and just paint along with the grain. Now I might have to take that tape off because it might get in my way now that I think about it. But that's what we'll go back and do later when it comes time to keeping track of where our top and bottom is. There we go. So this is first coat. We'll do a second coat. I'll probably do 1 coat of sealer for this round. We'll let it dry, and then I'll come back and we'll move on to the next step. So if you got any questions, just make sure and ask them in the group. Tag me in case I don't see it, just in case I don't get notified. I don't always have troubles with like that in the Facebook groups. Sometimes I'll have somebody post something in my free group and I won't see it unless they tag me. I'm not sure why, because I've got it set up so I'm supposed to be notified whenever somebody posts in there. But sometimes things get a little wonky. Okay. I'm gonna have to add more paint in here. Yeah, I used one of our old cups from when we got potato salad at Fairway. I didn't know if that would hold the paint okay for the short term. I'm not sure it'd last very long for the long term, but for holding it over for a couple of hours, it worked pretty well. Reusing and putting the lid on there, so. Add a little bit more paint. And I think I saw a paint glob. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm not crazy about the FIFO bottles, because it seems like air gets sucked up in there and it kind of, you start getting big paint blobs in there. So that's why I started sticking with the smaller bottles. Even I go through white cotton and fluff, Dixie Belle's cotton and fluff, and I go through them quite a bit. I still get the 8-ounce jars if I can from my local retailer, because I just like the fact that I have less chance of the paint having dried out areas and getting gloppy. All paint will do that. It's just, to me, I just have better luck with the smaller jars. I think you save money when you buy the bigger jars, but I don't go through it fast enough, If I painted large pieces of furniture all the time, I probably would. But since I mostly work on small projects, I guess I don't see the point. Oof, I lost it. My computer went to sleep. And just smooth out your strokes. Well, I hope I'm in the right group. Guess we'll find out. So this is our first coat on our front side. And I want to get the background part done today is what I'm hoping. So that way we can do one coat of sealer once we get all done. And let that cure before I come back, and then we can start stenciling and personalizing it for our giftee. That is my goal for today. And so far we're on track, as long as nothing happens. This has got such good coverage. But I am going to do second coat just to make sure. I want to have a nice, good, solid background for my letter P on the back. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and do the sides. Because remember that we only got the top half of the back side. So now we just got to get the rest of it. And make sure we don't have any too much buildup there on the edges. Just do it clean like that. We can clean it up next time. Make sure I got enough paint in there. So if you got any questions, just let me know. Getting those little grooves, because remember on the edges they're a little bit rough. We sanded them, but it's just a little bit rough still. It's not like the top and the back side here. We're almost done. So if you have to pounce, then just smooth it over when you get done. Because I don't normally leave a pounced edge on these. Got a little build up there I'm smoothing out. Okay, first coat is on. I'm going to put my brush back in my Ziploc bag and save it. And when this is dry, I'll come back on. We'll do a second coat and we'll go from there. See you in a little bit. Okay, let's try this again. We've got the first coat of paint on our front side, and I missed a step on the back side after we put the hanger on. I'll show you here as soon as I know for sure I've got you showing up okay. Yes. Okay, so we just got the first coat on. I'm going to flip it back over. Okay, we got the hanger there. I always put a label on my back of my signs, and it's my business card, and it pretty much just has my website. That is my label. That's my business card. So that way they know where to find me, because from there you can get a hold of me on social media or whatever. So basically I just decoupage this on the back of the card. And I use matte Mod Podge. I always get the big container, but I really went through it last time because I used Mod Podge in my dresser drawers when I lined them with fabric, which turned out really good. So I just use, sometimes I use this brush for stenciling paint because it's got that thick round brush, but I also use this to Mod Podge my labels on. So on the back side, I just go right over it and prime it generously. try and get all the corners. And then I place it just a little bit below. I'm about to go ahead and just take this off right now. Now this will slide around until it gets tacked down pretty good, see? So I usually just kind of hold one corner just for a few seconds. And then I go back over it with some more and just basically glue it down. And I got too much on there. So you just smooth out the glue. Okay, I wanted to make sure and do this before we moved on with the sealing the front part, because once we seal the front part, I don't want to turn it back on the front, turn it laying down on the front side again. I want to be done with the back side. So we're going to let this dry and I'll be back on and we'll flip it back over and paint the second coat. See you in just a little bit, about 5 minutes. Okay, we are back. I got the label on, the glue's dry, so I'm gonna go ahead and flip it back over and we are done with this. Actually, let me forget again. Let's go ahead and line up our front and back, our top and bottom. And just lay that there so that way that'll kind of help us know, you know, where the hanger's at, where the bottom's at, for future reference when we do our stencil. That tape came off. That came off crooked. Well, hang on a second. Hopefully I don't have to get new tape. There. That should hopefully hold. Okay, first coat. We're gonna go ahead and do a second coat. Let me get more paint in here because I know I was getting low. So temporarily these little cups are actually working pretty good. So if you gotta, you know, get resourceful and use some of these leftover containers, that's probably a good idea, but I don't think long term it's gonna keep it. Oh, and nice little paint glob. I'll keep quiet. All right, we're gonna do our second coat. And I already forgot a step. Let's go ahead and sand this coat down. There we go. Let's get around the edges. Sure I've got you guys up here so I can make sure we're in the screen. Oh, I'm sideways again. I shouldn't be. Well, maybe I can flip that on when I get this downloaded. I guess we'll have to just play it by ear. This is just one coat of paint, so I'll see if I can do that before we move on. 'Cause that's the second time it's done that. Okay, got my paintbrush that I've been using today. We're going to do our second coat. Watch out for any paint boogies. So when I get done with this coat, I'll be done with this brush, so I'll go ahead and soak it and then wash it later. I'm horrible about washing my brushes. So I usually keep in a glass of water and I'll refresh the water, and then next day I'm finally working on cleaning them if I'm lucky. So far I guess I've lucked out with how long my brushes have lasted compared to how I take care of them. I can only imagine how well they'd work if I did a better job on that. So let me know how you guys do your brushes. Are you guys pretty good at keeping them clean in a timely manner? I love this color. And there's a little paint boogie. Okay, so I went ahead and wiped it up, and just go back over it with your brush and smooth it out. Not the end of the world. I probably will have a couple more, considering I've got a couple paint globs in here, which is why I don't like the bottles. To me, I'd say save your money and just get more paint. There we go. So this right here, this deep brown, is going to be the actual color of our monogrammed letter. And the last name starts with a P. I've already got the design done, and up next you'll get to see how I did that in Silhouette. I'm trying to keep everything in order so you can follow it in order if you want to. And I'm also trying to do it so that way I have it broken up, because like here, this is the back to the basics. You may not need this. If you don't, you can always just skip ahead to the next step on how I do my monogram. If you do need this, then it's all here for you in simple, hopefully simple, straightforward steps for you. Little paint buggy. Yeah, I got a little bit more than I thought I was going to. Okay, almost down to the bottom. We gotta go around the circle again, around the edges. And I just go with the grain of the wood. Try not to get paint on my clothes since I'm not wearing my apron. There we go. Okay, and then we're gonna go around the edges. So I know I've got a couple areas that I still have a little bit of wood showing through. Just like that. I love this paint. And also, did you know that if you left this without sealer in it, you can actually use this as a chalkboard once you let it cure? I haven't done that with this color, but wouldn't that be kind of neat? Doing something other than just black. Okay, we're about halfway done. Now when I get done, I'll have to make sure before we go on to the next step that I have my top and bottom correctly. Or I should say after we move on, because we're going to seal this first when I come back. Okay, that's it. We'll let that dry and I'll come back and we'll put a coat of sealer on there. See you in just a little bit. Hey, we're back. Okay, she's dry. I went ahead and put my container with the coffee bean paint in the Ziploc bag I was using for my paintbrush. I'm going to see if it holds up because I still have just a little bit of paint left in there. And if I can save it, I would love to. I'm going to go ahead and do just a light sanding on my second coat here. Just like that, just like before. Wipe the dust off. Make sure my hair didn't fall on there. Okay, now I've got my Dixie Belle sealer and clear coat flat, just like before on the back side. Let me make sure we're in the screen here. There we go. So I'm just going to roll it to kind of stir it up on the inside without shaking it. And I've got my Klingon brush. I'm just going to try and do one good coat, hopefully, to help protect it. You'll see with this sign, I like doing, I'll I'll do a clear coat of sealer on this, you know, several steps along the way, and then when I get done finally, I'll do a couple coats to finish it off. And this is basically, if I make a mistake, what is that? Okay, hurry up and do that before it dries. If I make a mistake, the coat of sealer will usually provide a little barrier, so if I have to go in with like a damp rag, if like I have a bleed through on my stencil, I can go in and clean it up a little bit, and it'll protect my background. It's not a guarantee, but it will usually provide a little bit of protection if you don't go too crazy trying to clean it up. Got a little debris in there from my sealer somehow. Okay. And we're almost done. It looks like I'm getting a pretty good coverage here. Aha. This will be our last step for the background. And so then I'm going to direct you to the next video, which is how I designed this sign in silhouette, is what the next step will be before we move on to the doing the monogram and how I do it with a rustic blend. I love blending paint. When I figured out how to do this, it was just, and it was a really big hit too. These signs with different browns and different blacks. And also you'll notice, like if you go through my albums from last year, a lot of my signs, they were like supposedly the same colors, but they didn't look the same, because if you're heavy-handed or light-handed, it comes across as different. So I have to tell them it's not going to be exactly like, but it'll be similar. So just, you know, just a heads up. Even when you do these the same every time, if you're light-handed that day or heavy-handed that day, you're going to get a different look. So that's it for this round. We're done with the background. We're done with priming our board. And so the next one up will be the video on how to design the layout I have for this one that I have approved by my customer. So I will see you the next round.